We have with us today, we're very pleased to have a very, very seasoned analyst in the industry, Paul Hammerman, who's Vice President of Enterprise Applications at Forrester Research. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Judith. Thanks for having me on the webcast.
Absolutely. And Paul's going to be speaking about SaaS and outsourcing and some of the adoption trends, along with the strategic implications. We're also excited to have with us someone who's actually doing this today. His name is Dave Morrison, and he's CFO of Shop.com. Dave, are you with us?
Yeah, thanks, Judith.
Absolutely. And finally, we'll close with Karen Watts, who's the CEO and founder of Corfino, a very innovative new solution that combines software as a service, outsourcing, and business processes to go with it. And we'll wrap up quickly. Thank you again for your time today. I'm going to pass over to Paul, and Paul's going to start with the definition of software as a service, because certainly, Paul, we've heard many flavors of it, haven't we?
Yes, we have. As a technology research organization, Forrester publishes a lot of role-focused content to help businesses make well-informed technology decisions, and SaaS has been a topic of great interest to us for a number of years. And I'm going to discuss a particular study we did about the ROI of SaaS. But first, let's consider what we mean by software as a service. And this is a software deployment and delivery model which has several important characteristics that I'm going to run through here. First of all, it has a pay-as-you-go subscription model, which is based on certain usage metrics. And these consumption metrics are based either on the number or type of business users, and in some cases also the volume of transactions. Another characteristic is that the SaaS solution, is vendor managed. That means that the vendor hosts it, he updates the application and maintains it for you, and so you just use the software functionality. And this updating model has a big advantage over traditional on-premise software because the application is updated and enhanced much more frequently, and this relieves the customer of the burden of version upgrades and patching that's characteristic of on-premise software. Another characteristic is customization is limited with SaaS because the underlying code is the same for all customers. And the basic premise is that configuration capabilities replace the need to customize. Customer-specific customization tends to break the SaaS model because it usually requires specific installations, which leads me to the last point, which is multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy means that multiple elements of the technical environment are shared across all of the customers. And this is a much more efficient model, particularly for the software vendor, and the customer also benefits from it because it allows the software to be updated regularly and avoids a lot of the pain of upgrades. On the next slide, I want to introduce you to a study about the ROI of software as a service that we did last year. And this is based on a recent research document that we published, where we included several ROI-based models. So why did we choose to analyze the ROI of SaaS? Firms increasingly consider SaaS as a strategic alternative to on-premise applications, no longer simply a way to fill gaps in the application portfolio. So firms can't simply afford to skip on proper due diligence, and so they need to do some formal ROI models. And firms almost always consider SaaS as a cost advantage over on-premise in the short term due to its quick implementation times and pay-as-you-go pricing. But many firms still question the long-term value of SaaS, wondering if the rent versus own model necessarily has a crossover point, and if so, when. As SaaS continues to move into a broader range of applications and into larger, more strategic deployments, what we're finding is that as we examine client decisions across a range of SaaS solutions, we are finding that firms, in fact, do attain long-term value from SaaS solutions. So the study that I'll describe shortly is based on interviews of both SaaS vendors and end-user company case studies, as well as the experience that we've gained from talking with dozens of our clients through the inquiry process. On the next slide, I want to just briefly introduce you to some survey data that we collected. And annually, we do a large survey to study investment patterns in software. And this slide has some very recent data about why firms choose SaaS applications. Not all firms choose SaaS applications, and some don't, but these are the ones that do deploy SaaS. And the top two factors shown here on this slide are speed of implementation and deployment, as well as lower overall costs. So the cost model works for many companies, but ultimately it depends on a number of factors, including the overall usage volume and also what type of SaaS solution they're deploying and what it's being compared against. So we're seeing clear growth in the adoption of software as a service year over year, and also a reduction in the perceptions of barriers to SaaS deployment. On the next slide, I now want to get into the benefits of SaaS and really the basis for the ROI study that we did. So we found that organizations implement SaaS based on a number of benefits, and these include reduced adoption costs, which are reduced costs related to licensing, training, and support, and also for adding additional users as compared to on-premise solutions. So we found that SaaS makes it easy for firms to roll out new users, new sites, and new functionality, since it's simply a matter of turning on the new features. We also found that there's quicker adoption and rapid deployment, as the survey data showed. And SaaS, the reason for this is SaaS eliminates the need for firms to acquire their own instance of the software, their own hardware, and all the associated infrastructure. And also SaaS makes it easier for firms to deploy incrementally, which means that the purchasing cycles are also shorter. We found another benefit factor. We found that SaaS has higher levels of user adoption. So when we talk to a lot of companies, some of them complain that on-premise applications suffer from low user adoption rates, despite significant investments in end-user training and user interface design. What we found with SaaS applications is that they frequently inherit a better user interface than many on-premise applications, and we also find that users adopt the applications more readily, and so that the rollout of the application tends to be more successful in terms of user adoption. And another factor is reduced support needs. And just briefly on this one, as we interviewed a number of firms, we found that the support costs such as third-party hosting and in-house technical support staff, help desk staff, and so on, is significantly reduced with a SaaS deployment, and that's a benefit in terms of the cost savings. Finally, the last factor is flexibility, and the flexibility that's inherent in the configuration of SaaS versus more complex and difficult to configure on-premise systems. So moving to the next slide, I want to just touch on a couple of cost drivers related to software as a service. So organizations implementing SaaS will incur subscription costs for the life of the contract, but will also eliminate the many costs elsewhere that are associated with running on-premise applications, such as resources, hardware costs, and maintenance. So the implementation costs we found are significantly lower in a SaaS deployment. Many firms report that their typical implementation costs are roughly 0.5 to 1 times the first-year subscription fee, compared with 1 to 5 times the cost of the perpetual license for on-premise systems. So that's a significant reduction in the upfront implementation cost. We also find that the recurring costs can be lower. SaaS is, in fact, a recurring cost because it's a subscription model. But firms also have some additional recurring costs related to integration tools in addition to their subscription, and some dedicated resources. But these costs tend to be quite a bit lower than the on-premise equivalents. Finally, the upgrade costs are a big cost savings factor. When you compare the cost of updating or upgrading a SaaS solution, it's really relatively frequent and seamless, because these updates occur about 3 to 4 times a year versus a typical on-premise vendor that will issue a software upgrade every 2 years. And so the cost to incrementally move to the new functionality is quite a bit less, and it's also less disruptive than what companies experience